Hey guys, welcome back. This is Sub LBC here doing another video episode of what it takes to be a grower. And in today's episode, we are going to talk specifically about LED technology and really go into depth not only how the technology works, its strengths, its flaws, and where I believe it's going to eventually fall in the overall scheme of things as we look at lighting as it concerns cannabis growth specifically. Now, this is going to be a pretty long video. It's going to have a lot of in-depth discussion. Going to be breaking down the science behind the LED technology, but we are going to be using a lot of analogies in order to make things a little more comprehensible to the layman. So I want to apologize in advance for any analogies that I make that some people might take issue with. It is only important to me that everyone more or less understands the concepts that I'm going to talk about and how you can use certain types of formulas and strategies to apply your purchasing decisions to increase the probability of favorable outcomes as it concerns your gardens. That's really what this is all about. And in today's video, we're going to be attacking a pretty controversial subject, and that is the validity of LED lighting as it applies to indoor cannabis growing. Is it or is it not worth it to go with LED versus any of the other competing technologies out there? So first things first, guys, is that I think it's really important that we understand the technologies as they exist today and at least be able to start with a basic framework to determine how lighting works and what is good and what is bad and why it's good and why it's bad. So first things, guys, we're going to begin with a pretty simple concept, and that is photosynthetically active radiation, or the specific spectrum in the light range, that plants will react to. Now, without getting into an in-depth discussion about physics, essentially light and magnetism are exactly the same things. They just operate at much different frequencies. And magnetism is obviously not in the visible range, but when you get up to a specific wavelength, then light becomes visible to humans. And as far as plants are concerned, they have a very specific reactionary range, which we call the photosynthetically active radiation window, which generally is around starting at about 400 or so nanometers and generally ending at about 700 nanometers, right? And this will more or less encompass a large degree of both blue and red spectrums and orange and yellow and green and certain bands of ultraviolet and stuff of that nature. Now, when we are talking about full spectrum as it regards plants, we are generally talking about this specific range only. Obviously the full spectrum of light is not going to be beneficial to plants. In fact, there are certain bands of radiation, that are not good for plants or humans or just about anything else. So we are specifically talking about this range. Now, when we say full spectrum, generally plants will react favorably to a quote-unquote full spectrum lamp, which means you are giving them just this range of light. And if we were to look at a light like this, it would look pretty white because it contains so many colors. And obviously the more colors that you layer on, or more appropriately, is that white light starts as white and the colors change as we remove spectrums. Okay, as far as that is concerned, that is what we are talking about when we are talking about PAR. Okay, and although, as I've talked about in a lot of my previous videos, plants tend to peak out in the two specific ranges are the blue and red spectrums. Those tend to be the ones that plants really favor. Although you'll notice that in most PAR scales, the red spectrum reaction is much wider than the blue, which is much more discrete, which is why I like using HPS bulbs so much. The fact that they cover this part of the spectrum so widely, as well as generally giving pretty good blue spec as well. So with that being said, we have now identified the actual colors of light, right, between 400 and 700 nanometers that plants will generally react favorably to. Okay. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about is that it's not just about spectrum. I know that the LED fanboys out there will rave about PAR and stuff like that, and we'll get to that. They'll rave about other things too, such as color rendering index and many other things. But there is one baseline that has to be applied whenever we are talking about lighting, and that is, of course, the amount of light, or the lumens, the intensity of the light. And a good way of really understanding lighting, if you want to just get to the most basics, for growers anyways, is the best way to think about it is that lumens are your amperage, okay? And the spectrum is kind of like your voltage. And I know that electricians are going to freak out and say, well, there's really no such thing as good voltage versus bad. Voltage is just voltage. But in the grower context, generally speaking, higher voltages are better because it allows us to operate our devices on less amperage, giving us more overall wattage to use. If we can double the voltage and drop the amperage, we can run more juice. So in that context, voltage is better. Spectrum more or less equals voltage times the amperage will give you the intensity. And it works kind of the same electricity. For instance, you have a taser, which could be rated anywhere between 50 to 250,000 volts. And you might think, oh my God, that's a lot. And it is. However, there's literally, like a fucking ridiculously small fraction of a percentage of amperage behind that incredibly high voltage. So even though the electricity is super hyperactive, very speedy, since there's no amperage behind it, it really will just shock the living crap out of you and maybe knock you to the floor, but you'll be okay. But if you were put as little as 1 amp behind a taser rated at 50 to 250,000 volts, then it would fucking fry your ass to a cinder. Same thing kind of holds true with lumen intensity. Lumen intensity, the lumen rating of the technology is pretty much the multiplier of the spectrum. And it's something that constantly gets overshadowed when we're talking about future technologies, as if it is something that is, something that's not necessary anymore, or somehow that PAR spectrum seems to trump intensity, and any grower that works, had been a professional for a long time will generally laugh at this, but there are a lot of people that accept it. So if we are going to talk about lumen intensity, it's important that you at least understand where most of the technologies lie as it concerns lumens per watt. Now, starting at the weakest that we generally will use for indoor cannabis growing, generally we'll start with the CFL, right? Compact fluorescent lighting, generally puts out about 80 lumens per watt. So not too terribly great. As you move up the scale, you start getting into the LED range. Most LEDs generally will put out anywhere between 90 to 100 lumens per watt. And this is very well documented. Even some of the newest LED technologies will still work around this framework. Okay, so I'm not just like picking low numbers here. This is the generally accepted range of output. Okay, now stepping up from there, we take ourselves into the metal halide range, which is generally speaking about 115 lumens per watt. And then finally, at the very top of the mountain, we get to the high pressure sodium lighting, which will put out, generally speaking, about 145 to 150 lumens per watt. So a huge difference between LEDs, and nearly double the difference, when comparing the lowest to the bottom, the lowest, which is CFL, to the highest, almost double the intensity. LED is only 2/3 as intense watt for watt. So what does that mean? Well, it means that LEDs, in order for them to make up for their intensity shortcoming, are going to have to make up for it in a whole multitude of ways. And the first way that they make up for it is by implementation. Obviously the LEDs are very small independent chips, which can be sprawled out on a long panel, which will give them a little bit better consistent coverage than, what most high pressure sodium or HID systems can do, given the fact that you are limited by a bulb that is being mounted horizontally. And even though it does have a 360 degree cylinder type build, you're going to have like a very very hot center spot where the majority of the light comes from. And then you've got the reflector that basically crawls around the back, trying to reflect all of the light off the back of the filament back down again. With LEDs, you don't really have that problem. The technology is pretty much forward facing. It's generally built to shine in a specific direction out of the box, and you don't really need to run any kind of supplementary reflector with LEDs. It's just not the way they're designed. And although we have seen inherent flaws with some of the first and second generation LED technologies, we are seeing them finally improve at being able to harness much more of the light of the LED and focus it downwards. But because of its implementation, it's pretty safe to say that you can implement an LED system in more versatile ways than you generally can implement an HPS system. Now, the second thing that the LEDs really have to make up for in order to make up the ground lost on this, 33% lack of intensity is their ability to more completely fill the PAR spectrum. And this is kind of where the the scam or the fraud begins, or at least what I would refer to in this video as the bastardization of science. So before we get in and talk about really how LED technology works, we need to first kind of understand how it started, and at least break it down and understand what it is we're exactly dealing with here. So the first time I saw LEDs actually make it into hydroponic stores was probably back in like 2006. And back then, there were only a handful of companies doing them. I think UFO was one of the first. There were a few others. And this was back when everything was light bright days, right? 1 watt LED systems only. They were like the really old school, like the big hunky lights that actually wasted, a lot of their lumens because they weren't 100% down facing. They didn't have focusing lenses or anything like that. And these things were like $300 for a 150 watt, and they grew mutated plants. And it was just ugly, right? So the whole first generation of LED lighting was more or less dismissed by anyone who took cannabis growing seriously, which then took us eventually to second generation. And in second generation, we start seeing implementation of 2 watt and 3 watt LEDs, the more sophisticated LED diodes that are 100% down facing. They either work in clusters or they have special lenses. We start seeing them mounted in actual professional style enclosures, all the things that you would generally see on a pro style setup. But again, the implementation of the technology is not consistent across the market. And like I've said before in a lot of my videos, talking about LEDs is the main reason why I believe that this technology is a scam, is because there is no definite relationship between the amount of money that you spend and the quality of hardware that you get. It all really just depends on either luck of the draw or having, access to a lot of really good information. And even then, you could still get unlucky. And if you don't spend the money, then you are sure to get very unlucky. Now, when you compare this to other technologies such as CFL, you can spend the minimum, and still get a decently performing CFL system. And the same thing goes with HID. You can spend nothing. I mean, sure, you'll get an analog ballast and a very low quality bulb and a very poor reflector, but you are generally getting what you pay for. If you spend more money, it is 100% more or less assured that you are going to reap benefits from that investment. And obviously, with LED technology as it exists today, that is not the case. So the question that we really have to ask ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, is why is it the case that there is no definite relationship between the amount of money spent and the quality of outcomes with this technology? And the reason why, guys, is because it does come down to poor implementation. So let's first explain what's actually going on here with how these LED companies rate PAR, the photosynthetically active radiation score of their lighting. Okay. So when you look at an HPS bulb, right, or you look at a CFL, that light is being emitted at a very specific spectrum. And within that spectrum, there could be a whole multitudes of subspectrums that create the actual light that you're seeing. When you look at a HPS light, you see a very orange light. And unless it's like a super HPS 1000, and there might be more blue, the light might appear more light. But no matter how close you get up to that bulb, the spectrum and everything is consistent. It is a consistent fluid spectrum coming from that lighting source. And even though it is a replica of light, it is definitely a much closer replica of true light than what we get with the LED systems. Okay, and this is where it really gets ugly. Because one thing that I've seen consistently with LED manufacturers, they love to publish the really, really high CRI scores of their lighting systems. And for all you guys that don't know what CRI is basically color rendering index. And, just to make a long story short, essentially the higher your score is on this color rendering index is more, it shows that the light quality will render colors more accurately. For instance, high pressure sodium bulbs have a very low CRI score. If I were to take a red piece of paper and look at that red piece of paper under an HPS bulb, I'm, going to see kind of more of a white piece of paper. You know what I mean? The color rendering is very, very poor. Now, this doesn't mean dick shit to plants, okay? Because plants don't see colors the way that we do, and they could really give a shit less. Remember, they're only focused on a very specific set of peaks within a very short spectrum. So how accurately a specific lighting system renders colors is irrelevant. And it's even more of a falsehood with LEDs specifically, because the only LED that actually has a high CRI score is a pure white LED. The same ones that you will see used in professional photography. And that's one of the main reasons why LED has become so prevalent. It's because they're a little more cheaper, cooler running, a little easier on the battery than competing lighting systems. And they have a very good CRI score. So they render colors very accurately, which is incredibly important when you're dealing with photography and video. However, we don't really see pure white LEDs implemented in LED systems that are used for plant growth. Generally speaking, most LEDs are made up of probably between 4 to 5 discrete spectrums within the PAR range. And it is the mixing of these spectrums that actually create whatever light spec you actually want overall. And if you actually were to look at any specific LED on a panel, the CRI scores would be horrible, right? I mean, a red LED that is, say, dialed into, say, 665 nanometers, that's going to have a horrible color rendering index because it only will reflect light at that range. So the fact that LEDs try to use this is it's insulting, to be honest. Now, the second thing you have to understand too with LED technology is that LED technology, as it exists through the peak of the second generation, which will include just about everything that's existing on the market right now. The LEDs, I think, that are going to possibly, for the first time, compete head-to-head with HID are yet to be released. And we're going to talk about some of those later on in this video. But no matter what you buy, whether it be the Radiant LED, Heliospectra, L4A, any of the stuff that you see from Black Dog or the Diamond series LEDs that I've seen, anything that has the light bright built layout is going to be based on an inferior replication of light. The best way to think about it is kind of like how digital sound differs from analog sound, okay? Digital sound is a representation of analog. It's not real. And when it's played back, just because we can't necessarily hear the differences doesn't mean that there are not differences there. And for all you guys that don't quite understand what happens with analog to digital, essentially it's your audio wave being printed onto a checkerboard graph, okay? And on that checkerboard graph, the squares are either really big or they're really small. The smaller the squares are is the higher the resolution of the capture. And to give you guys a frame of reference, CD audio is captured at a 16-bit resolution. So if you were to take an audio wave, right, which goes up and down like a wave, and print it on this graph with 16-bit resolution, the squares are pretty small. So as you're trying to recreate this wave up and down, instead of having the pure wave, you got little tiny squares that follow the path of the wave. And obviously, if the resolution was much lower, then the squares on this graph would be much larger. And instead of having little squares that follow the wave very accurately, you have these big, ugly, splotchy, black square, blocky squares that follow the path of the audio wave. But you can tell that there's just so much shit missing. And obviously, with the higher the resolution, the smaller the squares get, until at some point you pretty much will have a pure copy of analog sound, more or less. Next thing, of course, is sampling rate, which is the amount of times that picture is taken, because audio is played in real time. So with CD audio, you get 44.1 thousand samples per second of this digital image. And then once you record these digital images, you just play the process back in reverse, go from digital to analog, and then voila, you have CD quality sound. Now, if you guys understand this analogy and understand the differences between low resolution and high resolution, then it's pretty easy to look at an LED and just say, God damn, this is incredibly low resolution. And it is. I mean, even with the LED system that I was working with, it was only 288 pieces on just a small rectangular panel. And out of those 288 pieces, there were only 4 discrete spectrums represented. And then each one, of course, is in different proportions. And that light is projected down the light kind of mixes with itself, along the way to, create the so-called PAR spectrum, which the plants love so much. But the problem is, guys, is that this process of taking a very low resolution light source and making it something that your plants actually like, there's a lot of gray area there. And implementation, like I mentioned before, is not concrete. There is no concrete standard to take this low resolution lighting and turn it into something that the plants actually like, such as a high resolution lighting with HPS. And that's obviously very high resolution. When you look at an HPS bulb, you're not seeing a bunch of, independent little light emitting diodes that are each dialed into a specific spectrum that you're trying to get. It's one unified spectrum. Same thing goes with CFL. You get a unified output. So with that being said, what has the LED market done to address this? Because this isn't just something that I'm talking about. I mean, these are observations that I've made, and now I've seen the new technology, and it appears that the LED technology companies are actually getting the memo. So what is up on the horizon as far as technologies offered in the LED form factor that can actually compete head-to-head with HPS to give it the same quality of high-resolution lighting? And I know that's not a real scientific term. I will just use it just so you guys understand what I'm trying to say, right? So to get the same high-quality lighting, but not quite the intensity. Again, you just can't quite get there. Even the newest generation not many of them are going to operate much higher than 100 lumens per watt. So they're really going to have to step up the quality of PAR, or at least work on new ways to put the technology to implement it in ways that you just can't do with HPS to make up for their shortcomings. So let's talk about a couple LED technologies that we are going to be taking a look at here, guys, over the course of the next few months. The first one that I want to talk about here is a new series coming out by a company called HydroGrow, and they are coming out with a new series of LED reflectors called the Sol series, with their flagship model being referred to as the Sol 9. And one thing that you should take into account when you look at these is the actual LED chip technology itself. Remember, as I described with the first and second generation, which are very low resolution, low quality of initial spectrum lighting. What you're seeing now in these new third generation, or at least what I will refer to as third generation LED chips, is that they're putting a lot more smaller chips on a single cluster PCB in order to mix those spectrums much tighter initially, so that the closer you look at it, you don't see so much of the individual LED lights emitting their discrete spectrum, but you're actually seeing it more the way that you're supposed to see it, as a fluid, mixed, high quality, high resolution lighting source. Now, with the Sol 9, you'll see by looking at a close-up of their new 100 watt, or these are the 50 watt LED chips that they're doing. There's actually 100 individual light emitting diodes on this tiny little chip. And that's there for a reason. Like I said, they are trying to make the spectrum higher resolution, truer to the real thing, something that has not been accomplished consistently with all of the first and second generation LED technologies. Now, I'm pretty much sold on where they're going, the direction. And a system like this is also advertised as being upgradable, although I don't really know what that means. I do believe that these individual 50 watt LED chips, or these bulbs, they can actually be replaced, just like a light bulb. However, I don't know if there's going to be any spectrum options with these. It might just be one spec fits all. Maybe there might be a veg versus HPS. But if they do come out with at least 2 or 3 different kinds of bulbs, then that would give you a lot of freedom as a grower to test your own combination of spectrums to get the best results that you want. And this is obviously something that we need to see the LED companies go direction-wise, if this technology even has a chance. But as we're going to later talk about, guys, I don't even think it's going to, even given these innovations. But this particular reflector here, guys, is going to retail for about $11.99, and it is advertised as having the equal PAR output of a 750 watt HPS, which scientifically speaking does not make any sense. There is no real direct relationship between wattage and par. Remember, par is only has to do with spectrum of lighting, and there's really no reason why a 750 watt should have any different par output than a 600 or a 1000. So what I think they're really talking about is that you get the equal performance of a 750 watt HPS, and you get it for the price of $11.99. So again, if you think it's worth $1,200 to get the same performance you could out of something that would cost, I don't know, what does it cost to get 1,000 watt? Let's just say you're going to compare it against 1,000 watt. The best top of the line 1,000 watt, even with all the fixings on it, run you about $600, a little bit less. So you're spending double the price, and you're not going to get the same kind of peak performance. You're just basically introducing a technology that you can compete head to head with, but obviously the two are not the same. So if you are going to spend $11.99 on a piece of technology like this, it better damn well produce like it says it does, because if it doesn't, then the extra cost obviously is negligible. But like I said, guys, I believe that the Sol 9 will be one of the first as far as LED technologies go to really consistently put out pound performance. And these things are going to be shipping March 31st, and I hope to get my hands on one. So moving right along, guys, another LED technology that's going to be coming along that I think has a very legitimate chance to outperform HPS on a watt-for-watt basis would be the new modular LED systems that Solus Tech makes, that they refer to as the HI, or the high LED system. I believe that some people, even in the company, have referred to their systems as HPS LEDs, because when you look at this thing up and running, it literally looks just like an HPS lamp. It's indistinguishable. And they're going to be coming out with two versions, 430 and 1000 watt. And these are going to be 100% modular. And based on how they're built out, it looks like they are designed to actually be built inside of Solus Tech's existing HID style reflectors. And they have like a triple XL version plus a smaller style version for their 430 watts. So obviously, if you're going to run the 1000 watt version, you're going to be running that instead of the more larger triple XL style hood. But you can see where they're going with this. They are really working hard to develop technologies that very much mimic high pressure sodium technology. Not only with this system, but also with the Sol 9. Both are built on a modular style system, meaning you can change the bulbs out. And another thing, too, that I didn't mention is that you'll notice that these actually have inner metal reflectors. At least the Sol 9 does. So you can see that they're really trying to mimic the superior technology. Obviously. And you're going to start seeing more and more of this as time moves on. You're going to start seeing much, much higher wattage, much, much smaller LEDs forced onto much smaller surfaces in order to more mimic the resolution and true spectrum of their HID counterparts. And with Solus Tech, it's more of the same. Modular design, except with theirs, they are actually going to be running 100 watt LEDs. And if I remember correctly, they're actually going to be selling these LED bulbs, these modular LED bulbs, in either 4 or 5 different blended spec ranges, from blue to red. So it'll give you the freedom to completely build your own spectrum. And this is something that's being advertised out of the gates. So we know that this is going to be available when the system comes out. But again, for the 1000 watt version, which Solus Tech advertises, will give you about the equivalent performance of a 1200 watt HID or HPS if it existed. That thing will set you back $28.99. And I don't know if that price includes the reflector. Like, that might just be the modular unit, but you still might have to buy the hood on top of that. And I don't know what bulbs it comes with, or if that even comes with any, because remember, it's a fully modular system. It's possible they might sell it without any bulbs, and you have to buy the bulbs separately and then determine whatever spec you want. And, so I don't know if that price is all inclusive, but I would hope that at least for $28.99, you would get something that would function 100% out of the box. If not, to get a 1200 watt HPS equivalent for that price, the recovery in terms of return of investment could take years. You know what I'm saying? And that's if you even get the production as promised. If you don't, then obviously you never make it back. And we got to really ask ourselves how quickly this technology is going to become obsolete, if it's worth it to wait it out 4 to 5 years. I don't think I have too many pieces of lighting gear that I've kept along are kept around that long, regardless of how good it is. I just constantly feel the need to change things. So really, really tough right there, guys. They are going to be coming out with a 430 watt version though, which I believe is going to be MSRPing at around $18.99. Again, I don't know if it comes with the modular bulbs or the reflector. I hope that it comes with everything. But this is a system that is currently still in prototype, and I don't expect, or I should say Solus Tech doesn't expect to be shipping it until sometime in like April or June. Although I am going to be trying very, very hard to get my hands on one of these systems earlier. And that's pretty much the status quo, guys. Whichever one that I can either get the cheapest or the earliest is the first one I'm going to test. But, as far as the new technology is concerned, we can see where they're going. Smaller chips, higher number of chips on smaller areas. They're getting away from these large, sprawled out, light bright type panels because the lighting is very poor. The implementation is not consistent, and the market knows this. The real question is it going to be worth it to eat these huge prices to get what I consider pretty marginal gains? And these are marginal gains as advertised by the actual companies producing them. So it's a tough sale. So where does that really leave us as far as future technologies are concerned? What else is there that is available to us, I guess is the real question. So don't be afraid, guys. There are options. And I want to go ahead and talk about the technologies other than LEDs that are going to be coming out. And I'm also going to talk about the technology that I think is going to completely defeat LED technology, and with a couple years of evolution, might finally be the HID replacement. So let's go ahead and talk right about that. And that is the magnetic induction lighting. And I got to tell you guys, this magnetic induction technology looks incredibly interesting. First off, what is magnetic induction and what makes it so special? Well, magnetic induction works on the exact same principles, more or less, that compact fluorescent lighting works on. And that is essentially you've got a sealed tube, and it's packed with, I believe it's mercury vapor gas. And with a CFL anyways, you have electrodes that sit on either side, and you run electrical current through the gas tube filled with the mercury vapor. And when the electricity flows through, it excites the mercury vapor and it gives off infrared light, which of course we cannot see. But on the inside of the tube itself, it has a thin layer of phosphorus. And when the infrared light goes through the phosphorus layer, that excites the phosphorus to illuminate. And that's where we get our light. Now, we love CFL lighting for a lot of reasons. First off is that it's very, very flexible in regard to its implementation. You have these really, really long bulbs, right, that give off consistent lumen output across the entire surface area. And just like an HID bulb, they're a 360-degree cylinder, so you can put back reflectors to reflect the unused light back down again, somewhat, other than the light that obviously cannot pass through the CFL bulb itself. But because of the fact that you can stretch them up to 4-foot distances and pack a lot of them into a reflector at very low wattage, just makes them awesome for growth. The only thing that really holds CFL technology back is the brightness, the luminosity, 80 lumens per watt on average for even the most efficient LED technologies out there. And I do know that they're coming out with new high output CFLs. There's some that just simply run double wattage, I believe, but that doesn't really get around the problem of the heat and everything associated with it. The real goal is to get as many lumens per watt as you can while being able to maintain a high percentage of par spectrum. That is all that we're really trying to do. And with CFL, we're going to fall short. It's obviously the lowest in regards to lumen output per watt. Why is that? Well, the main problem is, guys, with CFLs is the main problem that there is with not only HIDs, but also LEDs. And that is the fact that everything is based on electrodes, small pieces of metal in which we have to run high currents of electricity over in order to create the reactionary processes that create our lights. That is generally the limiting factor. I mean, we would love to push more wattage through these things, but we can't, because when you push so much current through these tiny electrodes, they heat up, things start melting, things start exploding. And more often than not, it is the electrodes that will define the ceiling of how much power we can run through a lot of these things. And with more heat and more current over tiny little bits of metal creates huge amounts of inefficiency. But with magnetic induction lighting, you get around that 100%. Magnetic induction, just like the CFL, is also a sealed tube type technology. But it doesn't actually have any electrodes. A magnetic induction tube is actually sealed all the way on both ends. And the way that it is able to cause the mercury vapor to emit infrared is by using magnetic coils, induction coils, which are placed over the bulb itself. Now, by eliminating the need to have electrodes and by being able to power lots of wattage into much bulkier electromagnets, we no longer really have that same electrode sealing that we do with the other types of technology. And you can run a shit ton more wattage through the induction coils, than you can through an electrode-based CFL. And what does that result in? Well, a hell of a lot more light. Generally getting it all the way up to about 100 lumens per watt, and being able to run wattages as high as 430 on a small, fairly small reflector. One that could easily illuminate a 3x3 or 4x4 area. Now, another thing, guys, that makes induction lighting so amazingly awesome is not just the fact you can run higher wattages to equal higher outputs, but you also have the really amazing color rendering index capability of the technology. And like I said before, CRI is one of those things that, are not generally applicable, but the CRI scores of induction lighting are equal to, if not better than, LED. And the lumen per watt output is about the same. And the simplicity of the technology is equal to that of CFL, and the implementations are equally as flexible as CFL. So that really just asks us to beg, what is the $1 million question? Is how much does this crap cost? And the answer is, guys, not that much. I'm actually looking at some stuff made by a company called Indigrow, and there are other induction lighting manufacturers out there. But this one here is in California. I believe they're in like the San Diego area or something like that. And they have a flagship 420 watt reflector, which looks like it could be used to perfectly illuminate a 2x4 flood table. And you could pick up one of these bad boys here for $795 and be able to acquire a true, and I'm talking true, full spectrum from the source solution, high resolution lighting system. You know what I'm saying? You get a true full spectrum. You have an electrode-less system, which basically gives the component, almost limitless operating life, or at least much closer to the so-called 50,000 power on hour ratings of the LED systems, of what they're claiming right now. So you basically get all that. The only thing you don't get with the induction lighting is you're just not going to be able to get up to that illustrious 150 lumens per watt. However, because of the fact you get such a better full spectrum than what can be managed by either LEDs, HIDs, or CFLs, you are actually dealing with a technology that gets much, much closer to the quality and results that we can expect from HIDs. Now, the luminosity of this technology I still think is a little bit too low in order for the PAR percentage or PAR score to make up for it. However, this technology is in its infancy, guys. I mean, we are seeing LED now in its third generation, with, the first generation being utter crap. Probably only, at best, 5% of the stuff created by the second generation was actually good. And as we get into third generation now, it's been, 6 years or so, at least in the cannabis world, that we've seen LEDs. And the magnetic induction is going to make its debut more or less this year. Hasn't really been too prevalent, although I think there have been a lot of people that have maybe been using it here and there for a couple of years. But I do think that 2013 we're going to start seeing a lot more of it, because I'm going to bring this stuff into my videos and we're going to show it to everybody. And based on some of the preliminary results that I've seen from people's gardens using this technology, it looks like some of the most consistent, kick-ass shit that I've ever fucking seen. And even if it does not create a replacement for HID, it will no doubt dump LED completely. I don't see how LED can compete with magnetic induction. There is simply, there is no benefit. There's nothing that LED can offer that magnetic induction cannot offer for a much, much lower price. So with the rise of magnetic induction, we will see LEDs become obsolete. They're going to go the way of the Dodo Bird or the Atari 2600. I mean, this shit's finished. In regards to CFL, I think induction has a chance to finish CFL. I don't see why not. They're not that much more expensive. I think the only real advantage that CFL has is that there's a lot less gear that you have to put on. I mean, with the magnetic induction, there is a little more bulkiness attached to the reflectors than you'll see with CFL. And CFL is still incredibly cheap. But if CFL is going to survive, it's going to have to become even cheaper because obviously magnetic induction technology, given time, is going to be getting a lot cheaper. So that takes us over to one last piece of technology that I do want to talk about. That is something that's been brought up many times, not only on my channel, but also other places as well. And that is the talk about the Gavita and how awesome the Gavita is. The Gavita, I believe it's like the LP300 or the 300 something or other. Essentially, it's a plasma-based technology. And 300 watt is the true consumed wattage by this thing. And just like the induction, it gives off a complete full spectrum. In fact, because of its nature, being plasma-based, probably will give you the most accurate to sunlight indoor lighting system you could possibly get right now. If you want the most accurate to the sunlight indoors, and this is, probably the way that you're going to want to go. But there are some things about this technology, guys, that really causes me to raise my eyebrows. And that is, with this specific system here by Gavita, I mean, first off, guys, the price is ridiculous. I think it's like $1,200 or so for a system like this. But here's what really just kicks me in the balls. 16,000 lumens of output? I mean, what? Just to put that into scale, okay, my 150 watt high pressure sodium, that little Sun Systems unit that I got for like free, and you could probably pick one up for like $60 or $70. That unit puts out 16,000 lumens of output. Now, I'm not here to make the argument that the spectrum quality is the same. I mean, obviously the Gavita unit is fucking way better in spectrum quality. But we are talking about literally a 15 or so times price difference between two technologies at equal lumen output. If we want to compare them just lumen to lumen, just for the sake of doing so, we're talking like 15 times the price to get this Gavita system. And they're both fully, 100% enclosed lighting systems, right? And keep in mind, the Gavita eats up twice as much wattage to get that same 16,000 lumens. And that just fucking bothers me. Essentially what this Gavita technology is essentially asserting is that their spectrum quality is so fucking good that they can afford to put out something that literally has no intensity. But I just don't see how that can make sense. I mean, I could make a keychain that has a really awesome spectrum, but I'm not going to use my keychain light to grow a plant. You know what I'm saying? You need to have that luminosity. You got to have that multiplier, the amperage of the lighting to make it useful. Because if you just don't have it, then we could all use key rings to grow our plants, but we obviously can't. So intensity plays a role here. But still, given with all that said, there's been a lot of hype around this technology, and it is something that I would like to look at. And hopefully we will be able to get one in here soon. I will tell you right now that a lot of our initial tests are going to start with like I said, either the stuff that we can get the cheapest or the stuff that we can get the fastest. Obviously saving the most expensive stuff for the later. It's just the way it is. And I hoped to be able to get the induction lighting system, the stuff from Indigrow. It's available right now. The Gavita is available right now. The Indigrow induction technology is available right now. But like I said earlier, the Soul series from Hydrogrow will not be shipping until March 31st. And Solus Tech is still in prototype without estimated shipping dates. Going to be coming in, April, May, June, July even, unless I'm able to work out something with them on the side to get it in here earlier. But Solus Tech is a company local to where I'm at, so that may be a possibility. So we're just going to have to basically see. But yeah, guys, I think this video has probably gone on long enough. I just wanted to spend this time to explain, how this technology actually works, to put into perspective what PAR is, how important lumens are, the versatility of technology, and making predictions as to where it's going. And hopefully with some of the new tests we'll be doing over the course of the next few months, it will help all of you guys to make better purchasing decisions. But we're just going to have to wait and see. But anyways, guys, hope that you thought the information was useful. And that's pretty much all I got to say. So thanks a lot for watching. And I will see you all next time.